Hey everybody, this is Mike with Free Roaming Hiker, and I am out here in Yellowstone National Park. I am starting on the Pelican Valley Trail, and not going to do anything too big. My original destination was for Turbid Lake. I don't know if I have enough time to make it there. Unfortunately, I'm in Yellowstone, don't have a ton of time, so I was looking for like a 6 or 7 miler. There's a junction up here in 2.2 miles from the trailhead, which I plan on checking out. And if nothing else, I will go to the Pelican Creek Junction. That's about 3.2 miles in according to the kiosk. And then Turbid Lake looked to be a little bit longer, so I'm gonna see what the mileage says there and just find a nice destination for a day hike. It will either be Turbid Lake, it will either be a junction along Pelican Creek. I'm not sure yet. For right now, I'm just enjoying the scenery, enjoying being out. So let's go see what we find. So starting up this trail, the first junction is 2.2 miles in, and that's really sort of the beginning of this whole trail system. You can follow some of these trails that go all the way up to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone area, and of course the Pelican Valley is down here by Yellowstone Lake. So I mean, you could just look at a map and get your imagination going. There's plenty of opportunity for some incredibly great multi-day hikes back here. So there's not a lot in terms of day hikes. I would say Turbid Lake, which is my original destination, is probably the main one for a shorter hike. In terms of something longer, there is, looked like a roughly 16-mile loop, looping a few of the trails back here, and that would be a good day hike. So most people that are coming to this area are probably gonna either do something short up to this junction or shortly after, or Turbid Lake. Otherwise, they're likely gonna spend more than one night out here, so a night or more. So it's a really pretty area. Of course, right now I'm in the forest, so not seeing too much more, but there is a lot of good stuff that I hear coming from back here. I have reluctantly not ever hiked back here, so this is good. I always like doing something short just to whet my appetite, find out some more info later, and come back with some more ambitious plans. And just a quick reminder, if you're enjoying this video, please like and subscribe. Every little bit helps. And any questions or comments, leave them down below. Definitely a lot of forest hiking. A lot of these trees are from the '88 fires, and that's why they look a little smaller. They have been growing for nearly 40 years now. That's kind of what 40-year-old trees look like out here, because for the first 10 years or so, they're basically buried in snow for most of the year. So they don't really get any sunlight until they grow tall enough to start poking up above the snow. So they get the short summers here, they get a lot of sunlight, they grow then, but then in the winter, they're, as saplings and young trees, they're basically covered up by snow, so they're not getting any sunlight, so they don't grow. So the trees here take a little bit longer to grow than in other places. So you can still see a lot of evidence from the '88 fires by looking for that. And of course, the '88 fires burned about a third of the park. That's roughly 750,000 acres, including areas outside of the park. That was 1.3 million acres. That was just because up till then, up to the 80s, they were basically putting out every wildfire which we've learned is not a good process because that just winds up building up a lot of fuel, and that's what had been happening in Yellowstone for decades and decades. And so finally, when they lifted that policy, all it took was a hot and dry summer followed by a weak winter, and this place just had so much fuel to burn, it just went through it. And that is why 1.3 million acres burned in this area in 1988. That's the story of the 88 fires in a nutshell. And now I have entered into older part of the forest. You can see the trees here are a lot older, taller, and that's because typically what happens with natural wildfires is they kind of just, burn out in like little fingers and don't really scorch a whole area. They just kind of burn through and clear the forest to allow for new plants and seeds to grow. Out here, it's actually a very healthy part of the ecosystem. It just becomes a problem when, you're in a drought, you don't get enough rain to put it out. Fires burn well into the fall, early winter. That's not supposed to happen. Obviously, with more fires, it becomes problematic. So there's a balance, and sometimes that balance is in balance and sometimes it's not. Popped out into this really massive meadow. Mountains in the distance. It is pretty stunning back here. And that's one of the great things about hiking in Yellowstone is you only have to go like a mile in, if that. And you just feel like you have this abundant wilderness all to yourself. That being said, there is a small group ahead, but that's not too big of a deal. I mean, they are dwarfed by this whole landscape. So it is pretty phenomenal looking, and excited to see what lies ahead. To be honest, at this point, I don't even think I need a destination. This valley is absolutely stunning. I mean, this alone could be the destination, and I'd be totally fine with that. But I'm gonna keep going and see what else there is up here. So the immensity of this valley is really kind of hard to describe, and getting here is really not that hard. It's only been probably a couple miles, maybe a mile and a half. A lot of forest walking, only a little bit of elevation gain, nothing really all that strenuous. And I mean, this valley is just immense wildness. And it feels completely isolated. It feels enormous, and at the same time that kind of puts into perspective just how massive Yellowstone is, because this is only a small sliver of what's preserved in Yellowstone National Park. So far I would rate this hike a 10 out of 10, and I'm not even planning on going that far into it. But yeah, just came up back there. There's a bison down along the creek, along Pelican Creek. So a little bit of wildlife back here. A northern harrier flying over. And this is pretty much the middle of the day. So definitely a wild landscape back here. And gonna keep checking out what's ahead. part of what is making this valley seem so immense is that it's really not that much smaller than the Lamar Valley. Distance-wise, it probably doesn't stretch as long, but in terms of width, it probably is pretty close. But the amazing thing about it is there's no roads anywhere. I mean, it's just this immense valley without any sign of human civilization. And that kind of is what gives it such a wild feel. There's a few more bison back there, but in terms of distance, I've gone a little, probably closer to 2.5 miles now, and the kiosk at the trailhead said that first junction is supposed to be at 2.2 miles. So, you know, their mileage always varies compared to what I might get or you might get. So I usually give it about a half mile of wiggle room. So there could still be a junction up here. I definitely did not notice another trail going anywhere. It's possible I just missed it while I was gawking, but yeah, I'll keep going up here and see, because there should be a junction coming up pretty soon. And if not, I may just wind up at Turbid Lake without even realizing it. And there was a junction. Came pretty much right after I recorded that last clip. So, Turbid Lake from the map looked to be a little bit farther than what that sign said was a Pelican Bridge junction. I think I'm gonna head there. Just looks to be a little bit shorter. I'm just fairly limited on time, so I don't wanna linger too long today. Still gotta drive back to Jackson Hole tonight. So, yeah, and exploring more of this valley is not really a bad thing. I don't think you could take a bad turn here. So I'm gonna see what this next junction looks like, given that my distances are coming out a little bit longer than what the park estimates. I'm guessing it's probably going to be about 3.5 miles in versus 3.2 with the parks, which is what the park said at the sign, the kiosk. And we'll just see what surprises are waiting here. And in terms of water, I brought 2 liters, which is probably more than enough for a 7-mile hike. I didn't really know what to expect, having never done this. So I kind of want to err on the side of caution, but there's really not much elevation change at all. A very gradual uphill, if that. So definitely have enough water. If I were to do something longer, I would want to check with a visitor center first and get their opinion. Obviously Yellowstone has a lot of thermal features, and some of the water is not really safe to drink because a lot of those minerals do get poured into the water. I have learned that the hard way. And yeah, it's just better to know what the water sources are like in terms of quality. So if you're doing a longer hike in Yellowstone, whether it's here or somewhere else, check with the visitor center to make sure that you're gonna have reliable water that you can filter and get back there. This little day hike, probably totally safe because I brought more than enough. It's gonna be about 7 miles round trip. 2 liters for me is plenty. Probably more than I'll drink. So we are set. We're just gonna keep walking, and kind of amazing scenery keeps popping up. Just another quick thing to note is that if you are planning on trying to hike this in the spring, you are going to be out of luck. And by spring, I mean basically once Yellowstone opens up, late April, early May, into, I would say even early July. You're not going to be in luck because this area is closed until about mid-July or so, early to mid-July. And you'll have to check with the visitor center on exact dates. But the reason being is that this is one of the first places grizzly bears will come out to try to feed as they come out of hibernation. So there are a lot of grizzly bears that fill this landscape during those months. And to reduce conflicts and keep people safe and keep grizzly bears safe, the park closes this whole area until the grizzly bears have moved on, once the snow has melted and they can get more into the wilderness. So just be prepared for that if that is something you plan on doing while you're visiting in the early months of the season. Also, if you did want to make this just a quick 4-mile round trip hike and you still want to get all the scenery, that little group that was in one of those earlier clips, they just went a little bit off trail up to a small hill, gave you a great vantage point, lots of great scenery from that spot. So that is one way to do it. That was right around the 2-mile mark, so that would put you back at 4 miles to and from the trailhead, and you still get a great sort of whetting of your appetite of this immense landscape. So here is some fun trivia about the Pelican Valley, which this is. Of course, everybody knows back in the 1800s, the government was trying to kill all the bison, sadly. And everybody got on board and people were essentially exterminating all the bison. And so they were doing such an efficient job that the bison were nearly extinct. And it wasn't until 1900 when the Lacey Act was passed that gave Yellowstone, it wasn't a national park service, so they weren't rangers yet, but that gave the authorities watching over Yellowstone National Park the authority to essentially fine and arrest people that were poaching the bison. Because prior to that, they would kick them out of the park, but they didn't have any authority, so the people would just come back in and poach more bison. So once that Lacey Act got passed, then all of a sudden the poaching stopped. And when that happened, there were only 23 wild bison left in the wild, and they were all in the Pelican Valley here because it was so remote and hard to get to at the time. So of course, with that low a number, there's concern about inbreeding. So there were a couple of ranches in Texas and Montana that shipped their bison that they were holding captive, keeping them as souvenirs essentially. They shipped theirs to breed with the wild bison that were left in Yellowstone, and that is where all our genetically pure bison have come from. And what was lost is there was actually a distinction between the northern herd of bison and the southern herd of bison that crossed, about halfway up the lower 48. So when you hear that bison were nearly extinct, they were literally on the brink of extinction with only 23 animals left. And they were all basically hiding out here. And fortunately, conservation efforts worked, and now there are tens of thousands of wild bison, with many more spreading out across reservations and public lands and more. So hopefully that is a trend that will continue. Okay, so I have made it to the Pelican Creek Bridge, which would not recommend trying to take. Obviously, if you're going to continue along that trail, which goes to Fern Lake and the canyon, you're probably just going to be better off fording. The other trail heads up this way, and that goes to the Pelican Cabin. It says in another 3.8 miles, and much farther out, Cold Creek Junction is 14.8 miles. The sign here says the trailhead is 3.4 miles. I logged 3.7. That's a forgivable amount, so just, you know, go by roughly that estimate. And yeah, I mean, if I weren't restricted on time, I could definitely keep going because there is so much to see here. But overall, a very stunning hike, very surprisingly easy, one of the more rewarding hikes with very little effort, and a really fantastic setting and spot in a vast wilderness. So worth putting on your radar if you want something easy and rewarding. So I'm going to call it a hike. I'm going to head back out, and if you like this video, please do like and subscribe because there's plenty more coming. I always appreciate every little bit. I'm obviously still a small channel at this point as of this recording, so every little bit helps. And if you do have any questions or comments about this trail, just leave them down below. And thanks for watching. Happy trails. You know what's crazy? I almost didn't do this hike. I looked at Turbid Lake at the map, saw it was a little farther than I was anticipating, and I almost left because I didn't think I would see anything else I wanted to see. So my advice to you, don't be that guy or girl. Just go do it. Go outside, find something fun. Doesn't matter if you find like a specific destination or not, just go spend some time outside, regardless of the distance. It's worth it.